The presenting sponsor of this episode of Pod Save America is Simply Safe. When Simply Safe Home Security's founders, Chad and Eleanor Lawrence,
Do you know what the Reddit Chad's last name is?
No.
Google it. I can't say it on this.
Designed their first security system in their kitchen. They did it for a very personal reason. Their friends had just had their home broken into. They were struggling to find a security system that was simple to set up and would make them feel safe again. Hence, Simply Safe. That's how they came up with the name there, Tommy.
Simple and it's safe.
And they've been making people feel safe ever since that moment 15 years ago, including our good friend John Lovett, who's not here right now.
Yes, I am. I'm John Lovett. I'm so safe in my house. What is this fucking voice? What is that? It was like Arthur.
It's both of you have really tried hard to do impressions of one another, and I don't know if either of them have landed.
I realized that Hannah and I have like a voice for the dog that we just not do for everything because we were trapped alone together for a year.
We had a voice for Leo that then transferred to a voice for Charlie, and that didn't really work out well because then it's like your kid and your dog have the same weird voice.
Yeah. They don't know who to answer.
Eventually, Charlie's going to talk, and then, of course, we can't have that voice for him. Well, anyway, back to Simply Safe. A passion to protect people not only drives every engineering detail in its products, but it motivates every interaction with its customers. And the thing is, Simply Safe just makes it so easy. It takes about 2 minutes to customize a system on their website, simplysafe.com/crooked. They have a highly trained security expert ready whenever you need one. Whether that's during a fire, a burglary, a medical emergency, or even just when you're setting up the system. There's always someone there who has your back to keep you safe and make sure you feel safe. To learn more about how Simply Safe can help protect you and your family, visit simplysafe.com/crooked today to customize your system and get a free security camera. You also get a 60-day risk-free trial, so there's nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
Go to simplysafe.com/crooked and get started today. Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm John Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vitor. Why did you say it like that?
I don't know how I said it.
I'll leave it in.
What did I say?
I don't know.
I have a tickle. I have a tickle. There's a gay cold going around. There really was. There was a gay pride cold.
But you are COVID negative.
Many times. Many tests ever since. But
on today's show, the White House calls out Facebook for spreading misinformation about vaccines. Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz talks to Tommy and me about climate change, immigration, voting rights, and his tweeting habit. And later, we answer a few of your questions. Let's get right to the news. The Delta variant of COVID-19 is currently tearing through unvaccinated populations around the world. And here in the United States, where about 43% of eligible Americans still haven't gotten their first shot, people's refusal to get vaccinated is leading to more hospitalizations, more deaths, and the return of restrictions in places like here in Los Angeles, where masks are once again required for public indoor settings. The Biden administration is now saying that one reason people aren't getting their shots is because of the misinformation being spread on social media platforms like Facebook. We heard it from White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, who told Kara Swisher a few weeks ago that unvaccinated focus groups keep repeating vaccine misinformation that they say they saw on Facebook. We heard it on Thursday from Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who issued the first public health advisory of his tenure on health misinformation. We heard it on Friday from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, and we heard it from President Biden himself in response to a reporter's question on the topic. Here are some clips of the last three people I mentioned.
My worry is that all this is misinformation that's floating around. It's having a real cost that can be measured in lives lost, and that is just tragic.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation on social media platforms. All of them remain active on Facebook, despite some even being banned on other platforms, including Facebook, ones that Facebook owns.
What's your message to platforms like Facebook? They're killing people. I mean, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
So Facebook responded in a rather whiny blog post that their data shows 85% of U.S. Facebook users have been or want to be vaccinated. They said they've removed over 18 million instances of COVID-19 misinformation since the pandemic began, and they've prohibited the purchase of ads that include false information about vaccines. Biden then clarified his remarks this morning, Monday morning, saying, quote, Facebook isn't killing people. My hope is that they would do something about the misinformation. That's what I meant. Tommy,
said Facebook isn't killing people. Mark Zuckerberg is killing people.
Yeah, just to be more specific, I want to clarify my comments. Mark and Cheryl themselves are out there killing people.
No, COVID is killing people. Facebook is spreading COVID.
Tommy, how much blame do you think Facebook deserves here?
I mean, some part of it. I found the Facebook response to be shockingly childish. They tried to throw it into a political frame and suggest this was about meeting a political goal when I think, it's about saving lives and getting people good information. Before COVID existed, the World Health Organization listed vaccine hesitancy as one of the top 10 threats to global health. So it's not a new problem because for years, Facebook, Twitter, other social media sites have allowed vaccine misinformation to spread. They also helped it spread. If you joined like a natural parenting group, you would often get algorithmically shown a suggestion that you join an anti-vaccine group, right? So they've helped these groups grow. They've helped them organize. This is a long-term problem. It's not just specific to COVID now. So it's hard to really delineate like what their share of the blame is. But it's notable that they're happy to offer you reams and reams of information about all the ways they're helping people get good information. And when you ask them to provide information about who is seeing vaccine misinformation on their site, they refuse to present any data or give it to researchers or do anything. So, clearly, like, you're hearing anecdotally in polling focus groups that people are getting bad info and getting scared about the vaccine on Facebook.
Love it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they've spent a very long time kind of priming the conspiratorial pump. That's outright misinformation and falsehoods, but that's also just sort of encouraging conspiratorial communities to form on a host of different issues and to elevate some of the most conspiratorial thinkers in our politics, mostly from the right wing. And there is plenty of misinformation they have taken down. But when you go and look at what stays up, no, it is sometimes hard to identify a brazen lie, but just asking questions, just sowing misinformation, just sharing misleading statistics, like that is the kind of that is the like bread and butter of countless conspiracy theorists. And to Facebook's point, that lives on Facebook, that lives off Facebook. It's a huge societal problem, but Facebook is a massive part of how people get and share information. And so it is a big problem on Facebook. Facebook talks about the billions and billions of pieces of positive, good information people have received. To Tommy's point, they will never tell you the other half of that equation. They know how many pieces of misinformation they've taken down. They could very easily tell us how many people saw it before that happened, but they won't.
Yeah, so one thing we know for sure is that the country is awash in misinformation about vaccines, right? 1 in 5 Americans, according to a YouGov poll, believe that it's definitely true or probably true that there's a microchip inside the COVID-19 vaccines. 30 to 44-year-olds were the most likely age group to believe that. So this is not something, Lovett, that we can just blame on the baby boomers, which I know you always love to do.
Look, a millennial is just a baby boomer waiting to happen. It's just the reality of the situation.
20% think there's a fucking microchip in the COVID vaccine. So we know that misinformation exists, and obviously Facebook is one of the biggest social media platform in the world, right? On Friday, the day this all went down, the top Facebook post about vaccines in the United States was from Marjorie Taylor Greene, falsely stating that the vaccines are not FDA approved. That was the number one post on Friday, the day all this went down, and then Facebook started complaining about it. So, I mean, it's true, like, Facebook is the sort of weapon of choice, but the ammo comes from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Republican politicians. Donald Trump is now flirting with it over the weekend. He had a statement, saying maybe people aren't taking it because they don't trust Joe Biden, so he's dipping into it too. But Facebook certainly helps spread it.
Here's one thing I think that is indisputable, is that their response is incoherent. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Democrat, big-time anti-vaxxer, he's banned on Instagram, but he's not banned on Facebook. How does that make sense?
Right.
How does that work? Maybe he broke the terms of service on IG, but not Facebook. But seemingly you could rationally decide, okay, this guy's a bad actor spreading harmful information. We should take him off the platform. And there was a study that labeled these folks the disinformation dozen that the White House has cited that found that 65% of anti-vax content comes from 12 people. They looked at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And 9 of these 12 are still on all of these platforms. So, they've Facebook's approach to these issues has evolved over time. They started in the lazy Silicon Valley libertarian place of like, we believe in free speech. We believe, it's bullshit. It's just like, that's the easiest thing for the Mark Zuckerberg of the world to say to rationalize and defend a hands-off approach. Over time, they started taking people off like Alex Jones, folks like that. And they've clamped down harder and harder and harder on disinformation. But I think until October of this year, they allowed anti-vaccine paid advertisements.
Right.
They were getting money.
I mentioned that. It was just in October. You're right.
Like,
they started doing that.
And there's still exemptions in that ban for legislation. So, I'm not saying this is an easy issue, but like it's completely incoherent when you look at their response.
Well, so you said like one easy step is at the very least banning people or posts, misinformation posts from folks who are already banned on other Facebook-owned platforms. That's low-hanging fruit. What more could Facebook and other social media platforms be doing in general to combat misinformation about the vaccines? Lovett?
Well, one step that Facebook refuses to take is like the only information we get, like kind of overview of what people are seeing, is from Facebook. And because Facebook has a communication strategy to be completely disingenuous, like obtuse and sleazy through virtually all of their communications for years, nobody trusts what they put out. Nobody believes it's giving them a full picture. And we know that they're kind of cherry picking the information that best suits their argument. They'll point out all the billions they'll point out all the misinformation they take down. They don't tell us how much of it has reached people, for example. And so there's this push to allow researchers access to Facebook's information, its data, its back end to kind of do research on the ways in which misinformation spreads and promulgates through their platform and off their platform. And they obviously do not see it in their interest to allow this to happen. But I would argue that if they genuinely believe they want to create this safe and productive place for community, they should want this transparency. They should want to be intellectually honest and rigorous and bring these kinds of outside experts in a way that's anonymized, that is a way that keeps private information private, but that will give them, I think, some credibility and some genuine sort of goodwill in the fight to make a safer community that a huge proportion of the planet uses.
So more transparency. The White House has called on them to be more transparent as well. Tommy, anything else?
I think giving independent researchers access to their data is the biggest thing they need to do as well. I mean, it just speaks to the fundamental problem with this company is like they say trust us all the time. And when you think back to all the, sort of like hat in hand Mark Zuckerberg apologies that have happened along the way, starting with him suggesting that it's crazy to think that fake news could have had an impact on the 2016 election. They've just given us time and time again reason not to trust what they say. So, I understand that these are not easy questions. The idea of working with the government raises First Amendment issues as well. But like to your point, Lovett, you would think you would want a platform where videos like the Plandemic video that essentially accused Dr. Fauci of creating the coronavirus didn't spread like wildfire to millions of people for a week before you take it down. Like, get some folks on top of this.
And again, YouTube is at fault there too, right?
Oh,
like
absolutely.
It's not just
YouTube,
Facebook. This should
Twitter,
go beyond Facebook.
Of course.
So, the other point that Jen Psaki mentioned in her press briefing is that Facebook has the ability to tweak their algorithm to promote credible sources of information over less credible sources. They haven't done that yet. How do we know they can do that? Well, there's the story of the, quote, nicer news feed after the 2020 election. In the days after the election, Facebook employees convinced Mark Zuckerberg to change the algorithm so that it gave more weight and visibility to publishers with high news ecosystem quality, or NEQ, scores, which are in Facebook a secret internal ranking that Facebook assigns to news publishers based on the credibility of their stories. And in the days after the election, when they did that, CNN, New York Times, NPR became more highly visible posts than partisan sites like Breitbart or Occupy Democrats. And so and there was this big story, we had a nicer news feed and all the employees were like, are we going to have this forever now? And then a couple of weeks after the election, after the insurrection, after everything, when Joe Biden gets inaugurated, they just shut it off. They could have done it.
Well, I know, and look, and they clamped down on anti-vaccine information in 2019 after there was a giant measles outbreak, a disease that we basically eradicated in California that led to like 80-something kids dying. They have, announced new policies limiting the spread of groups that give bad health advice or organize, the militias with ties to violence. So along the way, they keep taking these steps. The challenge is their response seems to be, okay, but we've helped so many people find authoritative information by steering them there. But if you create a community where for a decade, anti-vaxxers, QAnon, Alex Jones, just shred everyone's faith in institutions. And then you have a big tech company handing you over to the CDC for the information about the groups and people they've just been attacking. Like, it's not going to work. The damage is done.
Yeah.
It's also like they constantly try to turn their scale from like a liability into a strength, and we just shouldn't rhetorically and just allow that message just to work on us. Like, if a supermarket had a bunch of different kinds of cereal that were deadly, and that if you had a single bite of it, you would fall down and die.
Mm-hmm.
We would not accept
No.
as an argument from Stop and Shop that they've removed almost 90% of the deadly boxes of cereal. We would say, hold on a second, there's a deeper problem here. How is this cereal getting on your shelves? What brands are responsible? What are you doing to fix it? And so only in, we don't allow buildings to get so big that parts of it can fall down. We don't allow companies to get so big that their products can kill a certain percentage of their people. Well, sometimes we do, to be honest.
I was going to say, I think we do both of those.
Sometimes we do those. Yeah. But like, we don't accept it. And so we should not allow Facebook to use its scale as a defense. It's not a defense. You built this giant fucking conglomerate, this giant monstrosity. You have to figure out how to govern it. It's not our fault you got so big.
Oh, and one more thing, I mentioned earlier about Trump and the statement. What do we think about him now sort of dipping his toe into the, he actually has done it a couple times now, but it was his vaccine. He likes to take credit for the vaccines being developed under his watch. Now he's saying, people aren't getting them because they don't trust Joe Biden and they think the election was stolen. It was sort of a mishmash of a dumb statement, but
I mean, you're right that this is not a new position for him. It's more of a return to form. There was this infamous study from the late 90s called the Wakefield study that suggested that measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines caused autism. That study has been retracted. Subsequent studies have found it was completely wrong, but it has been enormously damaging and sort of is the root of a lot of the anti-vaxxer sentiment you see. Trump, as recently as 2012, 2014, was tweeting that kids shouldn't get vaccines because it causes autism. So if he's now going back to a position where he's raising concerns about vaccines and getting vaccinated, it would be his previous position that he, kind of grudgingly walked back from once he got into the White House.
I mean, thank God he wants to take credit for the vaccine on some level, because if he didn't, it's very clear he'd be completely anti-vax. He'd be right there with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson right now. That's where his heart is.
Yeah.
But of course, he wants credit for the vaccine. He is vaccinated. So I think we have this statement from him is actually just punditry. Right. He's not saying that the mistrust is correct. He's saying, look at what Biden's causing because of for all the reasons he wants to, lay blame at Biden's feet. But he's not actually crossing the threshold yet.
Yeah. But Donald Trump Jr., if you look at his Instagram, which for some reason I do, he posts anti-vaccine stuff all the time. Like recently he posts like a photo of a woman with a baby arm growing out of her head that said something about raise your hand if you got the vaccine. Right. It's all like supposed to be for the yucks, memes, LOL stuff, but it's like
edgelord Donald Trump Jr.
Exactly.
All right, Facebook bad. Let's turn to the Biden White House. They aren't really known for even hitting Republicans or right-wing media all that hard. Why do you think they decided to step out on Facebook?
I mean, I think that I talked to some folks there over the weekend who said that the Facebook.
I'm sorry, did you do some reporting?
Yeah, goddamn right I did. I had like a Newsies hat on. I got out my typewriter. They said that the Facebook's response after Vivek's report went out was just unacceptable, and it just seemed like they were going to drag their feet again. And then the White House is out there saying, "Hey, we really need your help with disinformation and hygiene on your platform." And instead of hearing about Facebook launching some new initiative to get anti-vax info off their platform, you read stories in the New York Times by people like Kevin Roose about how they might get rid of CrowdTangle, which is the only tool we have to really understand how people are engaging with posts on platform. Like what posts are getting viewed the most. It's an internal Facebook entity that they might just shut down because it's creating a PR headache for them.
Because they don't like seeing Kevin Roose's posts about the top 10 Facebooks being
exactly.
like Bungino, an AP story about
Ben
the
Shapiro.
defeating of a sex trafficking ring because QAnon latched onto it. Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, it does seem like, look, the Biden folks were just, they're frustrated, right? And I'm sure President Biden's comment, I don't even know if his comment was planned about it's killing people. I'm sure he's frustrated because the vaccination campaign has stalled a bit over the last month, and they're seeing the Delta variant spread. And I think going public with this was the only way they knew how to do it, as opposed to just like quietly talking to Facebook behind the scenes. You know?
It just comes on the heels of like constant dumb decision making by Facebook. Like, they didn't ban Holocaust denial until October of 2020.
That was Mark Zuckerberg's official position, was that he thought it should be on the platform so people should know it's out there.
Love it. It's worse than that. He said, I don't think that they're intentionally getting it wrong when asked about people who post Holocaust denial. Like, yes, they are, man.
Yeah, it seems like you might be off on that one.
There's a long history of intentionally posting anti-Semitic stuff. They wouldn't fact check political ads in the 2020 campaign. So I imagine there's just an accumulating frustration at the idiocy.
I just want to say also that I appreciated this sort of Biden saying they're killing people. It launched this conversation, then Biden walked it back. It's kind of like a reverse Trump, because what used to happen is Trump would go out and say something kind of that implied something so beyond the pale it kind of repulsed most human beings. Then a few of his most devoted people would go out there and say he didn't mean it, and then on Monday he would say it explicitly, and they'd all be embarrassed. This is the reverse of that. Biden says Facebook's killing people. I don't think they are. A bunch of people defend him, and then he walks it back. He like de-escalates. That's all.
That's one of the many differences.
Among many differences, yes.
Biden team is trying a lot of different strategies to get more people vaccinated. They're calling out misinformation on Facebook. They've got community leaders going door to door. They've got Olivia Rodrigo at the White House. Who do they still need to reach and persuade to get a shot? And what else do you think they should try at this point?
I mean, 1 in 5 Americans believes there's a microchip in your COVID vaccine, right? You mentioned that earlier. Same poll found that 40% of the country thinks the threat of COVID was exaggerated for political purposes, including 85% of the unvaccinated. So I think, the microchip crew, probably going to be a tough get.
Tough sell for the microchip crew.
There are a bunch of people in this country who I think have understandable questions or concerns. They look at the Tuskegee experiments where, black men were given syphilis and not treated by the government. Horrible part of our history. You can imagine why that would create hesitation in the black community. There are young people who are just confused about whether or not they need it. And they've heard news stories about the side effects that are scary. There's pregnant women. There's young people, right? There's all kinds of different groups who I think have legitimate questions, concerns, have seen something disconcerting. Those are all folks that are reachable. I think the hardcore QAnon anti-vaxxers, we're never going to reach them.
I feel like you have to separate anti-vaxxers from vaccine hesitant and vaccine skeptical, and we should probably stop saying anti-vax so much because that creates an identity, and we don't want to affiliate people who have concerns, rightly or wrongly, with people that will never get it and are kind of
I always try to say hesitant.
And then so Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll of people who got the vaccine, people who were hesitant to get the vaccine. And they looked at the 21% of adults who are now vaccinated after saying in January that they planned on waiting, would only get it if required, or would definitely not get it. And so they looked at what changed their mind. 1/4 said it was seeing others, especially friends and family, get vaccinated. 17% were persuaded by a family member, 10% by a doctor or healthcare provider, and then by close friends, coworkers, and classmates. And many of those who said they were persuaded after talking to their own doctor mentioned their doctor encouraging them due to their own or a family member's medical condition, so trying to protect themselves or their family. And then the other factor was the easing of restrictions on vaccinated people. They decided to get it because they could get back to normal life. One of the respondents just wanted to go to the Bahamas. And so we should not underestimate the power of vaccine mandates.
Well, and you'll see a lot of people in LA have responded to the mask mandate that returned here by saying, well, what's the point of getting the vaccine? I thought if I got the vaccine, I didn't have to wear a mask anymore. So that is one potential consequence of that.
Yeah. And look, back to the sort of Mark Zuckerberg being completely naive about why people post Holocaust denial. The other thing I think that they don't seem to get is, according to the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which put out this Disinfo Dozen report about these super spreaders of bad information about vaccines, they have found that anti-vaccine activists specifically target Black communities and push this stuff on them, knowing the really dark history in our country. And that's why it has to be an active campaign to counter that misinformation or remove it with good information, right? Because there's a lot of people for whom this is a thing they're very passionate about. They think about, talk about it, organize around it all day. And the rest of us just get vaccinated at some point in our lives and move on with our lives. And there's no countering the disinformation happening. There's just a big void.
So the same poll that Lovett cited, the Kaiser poll in June of 2021, last month, 65% in that poll said that they had already received at least one dose. We know it's a good poll because at the time in June, it was about 65% according to the CDC as well. 14% said definitely not. That's the microchip crew. 10% said we're going to wait and see. And then 6% said they'll only do it if required. So that 10% and 6% is like basically who we're talking to. There's 3 things you can do, right, to get people to get a vaccine. There's persuasion, incentives, and mandates. Persuasion is what you guys have been talking about. The other persuasion strategy that I think we haven't used yet, it'd be interesting to see sort of previously vaccine hesitant people who got the vaccine record testimonials, video testimonials and ads, and start running ads where people said, I didn't know if I wanted to get it. And then my father convinced me, or my mother convinced me, or my sibling, and see how that goes. Incentives we've seen the lotteries in different states, right? I do think, everyone's very concerned about mandates. We've had mandates on a state and local level for vaccines forever in our history. In France, Macron, the president of France, announced on Monday that proof of vaccination or a negative test would soon be needed to access public events, restaurants, movies, and airports. Since then, in just 48 hours after his announcement, more than 2.2 million French people booked vaccination appointments. So I really, look, they are legal, right? In March, a federal court upheld an employer's vaccination mandate. It was a hospital system. In Texas, a federal judge held it there. The Supreme Court has upheld local and state mandates for schools for 100 years now. Once the FDA offers a full approval, instead of just emergency use authorization, they'll be on even firmer legal ground, but already employers can do this. And we know that one employer who actually mandates vaccines for their employers is Fox News.
Who?
According to Fox
Who works
fucking
there
News.
that we know?
So Ryan Grimm reported this morning that Fox News has something called a Fox Passport or something, that if you're vaccinated, you can. Now, look, you don't have to mandate that every employee gets it. What you can do is say, okay, you either have to get vaccinated to come to work in the office, or you need like a negative test every day or every week or something like that. So you make it harder to not be vaccinated if you don't want to go the full mandate route. But like, I really think instead of just like counting on fucking mask mandates forever, which aren't as effective as vaccinations, you should start vaccinating people. LA County doesn't even have a requirement for their city employees to be vaccinated, even though San Francisco does right now, and they're putting out mask mandates.
And one other piece of this too, the other side of that, I feel like the carrot to that is I do think that there are a lot of people who, are, if not, they're skeptical, they're hesitant, maybe they just haven't gotten around to it yet, and that employers encouraging it and employers giving people time off.
Huge. Or even cash bonuses.
Or bonuses,
Yeah.
just incentives at work to get vaccinated and make it part of the culture of your work to get it, I think is another way to kind of encourage it. And the other small thing is, we are now at the place where we're trying to reach people who are hesitant, maybe more likely to be mistrustful of government for a host of different reasons. And I do think that saying vaccines are safe and effective, there is maybe room to start saying something, just like making it a comparison. COVID is far more dangerous than any vaccine. COVID is the risk. The vaccine is far, far less risky. And make that comparison plain to people.
Yeah, I do worry. You're starting to see very clear studies about how partisan vaccination has become. Right, a lot of red states have far lower levels than blue states. You're starting to see sentiment on Twitter and other places. It's basically like, you know what? Screw these people. If they don't get vaccinated, they deserve to get. Sort of shouting them down, calling people idiots. I think that's very bad. I think we need to approach this conversation with empathy. I think there's a lot of reasons to be scared. There's a lot of bad information online. There's a lot of lack of clarity about how science works, about what an mRNA vaccine is, about how it was developed so quickly, right? Like you could ask a lot of reasonable questions. And I think if we shut people down and attack them and call them stupid, it's not going to work, especially when you're talking about people vaccinating their kids, right? Like, it's scary.
And again, empathy is great, but even if you want to be purely self-interested about it, the longer this is out there and the fewer people that are vaccinated, the higher the chance that a variant comes along that evades the vaccines. Also, like, this is a stress on our hospitals, right? Like, there are hospitals and healthcare workers in places where there are not a lot of vaccinated Americans who are just seeing the ICUs fill up, and that not only, wears down our healthcare workers, but that means that there's less capacity in those hospitals for other people who get sick, right? So it is in the interest of all of us, for even the most vaccine hesitant person out there, to get the shot. And we should be doing everything we can to convince those people to get a shot or require it.
And don't take your cues from Twitter. Twitter is not the place to have this debate. There are actually people that have spent a very long time thinking about how to persuade vaccine-hesitant people to become vaccinated. Listen to them.
Yeah.
They're often called vaccine whisperers. There are groups that have been formed that have specialized in this and looked at this, and we should be looking to them and not the ridiculous political arguments that play out online about, is this punishment? Is this incentives? Is this persuasion? Put that all aside. There are people that know how to do this.
All right. When we come back, Tommy and I talk to Senator Brian Schatz about climate, voting rights, tweeting, and more. Pod Save America is brought to you by Magic Spoon.
Okay, I got something different for you, John. I'm gonna bring a little Howard Stern to the show. Talk about my marriage for a minute. So I don't do it a lot, but yesterday, our living room has become a second office because we all were trapped in our homes for a year. And I went to the door and the dog barked because someone knocked something at the door. Right, and we get there and it's a box of Magic Spoon. And Hannah brings it in, and I'm in the living room / office, and she's like, "Hey, we have a lot of these. If you want to like cancel them." And I snapped. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I love Magic Spoon. No, I'm going." Like I saw just a horrible future ahead of me if we canceled it, and I was upset for a second. I love Magic Spoon.
You were a good fucking customer. I will say that I have been home alone for the last couple of weeks, and when you're home alone, you kind of just like eat whatever you want. No one's judging you. I still haven't made it to the Outback yet, but I might go there. And I had a little bit left of the Magic Spoon Jelly Donut cereal.
Ooh.
I had a little bit left of the cocoa cereal and a little bit left of the original Frosted.
Did you do a graveyard?
I put them all together.
All the same?
Not for breakfast, for snack at night. Just sitting there watching TV with a big bowl of mixed Magic Spoon, and it was delicious.
That does sound good.
0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. Only 140 calories in a serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free. You can build your own box or get a variety pack with available flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, and cinnamon. Go to magicspoon.com to grab your delicious cereal and try it today, and be sure to use our promo code CROOKED at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/crooked and use the code CROOKED to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. Pod Save America is brought to you by Bev. Bev is a female-first canned wine brand that was founded to change not only the way a product is consumed, but the way an industry and culture have operated for generations. In an industry that's almost exclusively masculine, Bev is breaking norms and creating something from the female perspective that's approachable, fun, and consumer-centric. Bev's all about inclusion and giving a voice to those who've been historically silenced. They have 4 varietals: Rosé, Sauv Blanc, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Noir. Talk about your favorite varietal, Tommy.
It's hard to pick a fave because they're all really good. The Sauvy B, I think, is the blue can. And like I think I've said before, you take a few to the beach. No one expects you to have wine in a sleek little blue can.
Did not expect a selling point on this product would be eluding law enforcement.
Yeah, well.
Just a couple of bros selling their favorite varietals of canned wine.
Well.
And now you're going to know how to drink in public.
Well, we got to get around the system until we can change it. You know what I mean?
Their wine. Here's another good thing about their wines. They're dry, crisp, and a little fuzzy.
I think it says fizzy. Shit. Leave it in. Leave it in.
Little fizzy. I think I've done that before. I think it's the second time I've done that. Super refreshing and delicious. They got 0 sugar and only 3 carbs and 100 calories per serving. Great for Keto Carl.
Keto Carl over here, yeah.
Bev makes it easy to have a glass of wine and not overindulge. Perfect when you're cutting back on sugar or drinking. The cans may look cute and tiny, but each can is a glass and a half of wine. Perfect for when you don't want to open a bottle of wine just for yourself. A 24-pack is equal to 8 bottles of wine. That's sort of nice. Sometimes you open a bottle of wine and you're like, oh, do I have to?
No, you do the thing when you're like, when did we open this? Thursday? Tuesday? 7 days? Is this bad? I don't smell it. You smell it. I don't want to smell it. And you just pour it out.
You just got a couple of them sitting on your counter and they're all sort of like a quarter of the way full.
Right, and they're all just vinegar.
Yeah, that's not great. Their 4-packs are great for gifting or hosting. Bev ships straight to your door and shipping's always free. We've worked out an exclusive deal for Pod Save America listeners. Receive 20% off your first purchase, plus free shipping on all orders. I suggest trying their best-selling Ladies' Night Variety Pack so you can check out all of their delicious varietals. Obviously, that's a suggestion right from me. Go to drinkbev.com/crooked or use the code CROOKED at checkout to claim this deal. That's drinkbev.com/crooked. Pod Save America is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Recent data shows that out of all the female-owned businesses, it's estimated that 1 in 3 is owned by a mom. Moms, we all love moms. Ever wonder how these amazing moms and dads find time to hire for their businesses while juggling their families? The answer is, of course,
ZipRecruiter.
ZipRecruiter, you got it. Right now, you can try it for free only at ZipRecruiter.com/crooked. We have an example here for you. CEO and founder Talia Goldstein is one such Mompreneur is the word that we're using.
I use that one a lot.
Besides being a mother of two, her personalized matchmaking company, 3-Day Rule, is constantly growing, and she needs to hire several matchmakers a month. So she uses ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful technology helps her find people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply. But Talia is not the only employer who loves ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at this web address, ziprecruiter.com/crooked. This special offer is only good at ziprecruiter.com/CROOKED. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. On the pod today, we have the Deputy Whip for the Senate Democrats. Welcome back, Senator Brian Schatz. How's it going?
It's going fine. Nice to see you both.
I just want to start by saying Tommy walked into the office today. He is wearing a button-down shirt, which I haven't seen him in over a year. And it was because he thought you were going to be here in the office. He thought you had a layover in LA on your way home to Hawaii, and now he's all dressed up for no good reason.
My wife asked me if I was going to court. And I said, no, we have a big interview.
I like that that's fancy for you. That's great.
Yeah.
This is as fancy as it gets.
Senator, there was a lot of elastic waists over the last year and a half, so we're climbing back.
That shirt is like very casual for 90% of my colleagues.
Well, I'm wearing shorts. All right. So I saw that you spoke to NBC News the other day about the prospects of passing Joe Biden's economic plans and said that you haven't been this optimistic in many, many months. What's gotten into you? Why are you so optimistic?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. It's a mood, right? It's it's the sense that if Joe Biden's for it, if Chuck Schumer's for it, if Nancy Pelosi's for it, there is pretty good unity in the Democratic conference that we're going to move forward on the American Jobs Plan. We're also procedurally kind of in a good spot. We have plans to move on the so-called bipartisan infrastructure package, and then followed by the budget resolution, which sort of unlocks reconciliation, which we can do in September. So we're like in pretty good shape procedurally, but I think it really more is an intuitive sense that there's a recognition we've got to do this. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of meeting the moment. And that doesn't mean that this bill won't face numerous near-death experiences along the way, because it's a big bill and that's what happens, and people threaten to kill it all the time, and Axios will report trouble for the bill, every 72 hours. But we're in a good spot, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic.
One of the big parts of the bill is obviously going to be like climate, Joe Biden's entire climate agenda, or most of the climate agendas in this bill. You chaired I think it was some fancy committee on climate a while back. I think it was like a special committee on climate. And I remember you telling Vox about a year ago that you thought that when it came to climate and agreeing on climate policy, all the Senate Democrats are united and ready to roll. Do you still feel like that's the case looking at what's going to be in the reconciliation bill around climate?
Yeah, 2 points. 3 points. First, Vox, not Fox, right?
I said Vox. Yeah,
okay.
Did I say Fox?
I just couldn't hear it exactly.
I know you were
right.
You were on Tucker's show a year ago.
Yeah, I don't remember a climate interview with Fox. First of all, I think that my experience in Hawaii when we were starting the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative in 1999, there were lots of kind of stupid arguments in retrospect between people who cared about wind or people who cared about solar or people who cared about conservation. And what we realized is that the best policy pathway and the best political pathway are to enact all of the various measures to address the climate, because the size of the problem and the size of the opportunity is so massive that we really have to throw everything we've got at it. And that sort of unlocks a political universe where we don't really have to fight with each other over very much. So we're the top line number that was authorized, or not authorized, that has been contemplated of 3.5 trillion provides enough room for us to do not just meaningful stuff on climate, but the kind of climate action that will meet the moment, understanding that it's super rare for us to have the trifecta. But look, we're a diverse caucus, and people are going to have hives about various pieces of the bill, and we got to work that out. So I don't want to underestimate the challenge in front of us, but I think there's a recognition that the Democratic caucus has to deliver on climate, and not for some sort of obscure political reason because it's going to win us the midterms, but because the planet is on fire. And everybody gets that, and the collective determination is giving me a ton of hope.
Well, I'm glad you talked about the scale of the problem in the hives, because you work in an institution that is in part designed to tell the country, the House of Representatives, to slow its roll a little bit, right? I mean, the cliche, the very modern metaphor you always hear is that the Senate is the cooling saucer, but we live on a rapidly warming planet with a bunch of people that move at Twitter speed, and that can create some friction, right, between lawmakers and people like you who are trying to work the process as fast as you can, and then activists like us who sit around and tweet, which is obviously much more important. So what is your message to people like me and John
Stop
who
tweeting.
are filled? Thank you. Do you find our tweets annoying?
You first.
Touche, John.
We've come to an impasse. But what's your message to activists who are filled with existential climate dread and want to figure out a way to sort of push lawmakers to meet the moment, move faster, et cetera? Like, what do they need to know?
So first of all, don't despair. And the reason that I say don't despair is not sort of just to be reassuring, but we have to remind ourselves that our opponents thrive on our despairing. They want us to feel despondent. They want us to feel like it can't be done. And so momentum begets momentum in the political context. And so we should turn our righteous outrage into action. But those actions should be equal to the moment, which is to say, it is not about finding some line in the sand and whipping Democratic members about whether they're for a specific provision in the climate bill. Because the danger there is what I would call the Keystone thing, which was an important fight, and I was opposed to the Keystone pipeline, but in the end, that became the measure of whether or not we were making progress on climate or not. And look, Keystone's dead, and the climate is still a huge challenge. So you can use individual provisions in this